What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking out for the future. I'm also going to break down what the news, data, and technicals are telling us about the overall market, how this may affect Tesla, and why tomorrow may be a very indecisive day for the markets because we have so much data coming out. And despite that, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow exactly, but I do believe that before Friday close comes, Tesla is most likely going to see a big pump above $200 to about 202. I believe this is most likely going to happen before Friday close once again, and I'm going to break down exactly why that is. Now, before I break anything down, though, before I get into any more details, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you're guaranteed up to 12 free stocks, each worth up to $3,000. And the best part is, any could be a free Tesla share. It's a limited time offer. The offer ends in just 2 days, so it's almost over. Check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Tesla was up 2.48% for the day, closing just above this resistance line that I drew out right here. And overall, it's actually doing quite nice. If you look at what the stock was doing over the last couple of days, it's actually continuing to make higher lows. And overall, the trend is now more in the upside direction. Now, the MACD on the daily is about to turn bullish. And overall, I do believe Tesla is going to make a big move eventually, either on Thursday or Friday, to try to fill the gap up here around this 202 level. But at the very least, I see it breaking above 200 because of all the good news that's coming out and the hype associated with deliveries to come out very soon. However, I want to note that I'm not as confident about Thursday because so much data is coming out. It could actually cause a big shift in price action, whether the market trades sideways or even cools off a bit. I'm not too sure about Thursday, but I believe before Friday close, like I said, we're going to get that big pump. Now, let me break down why I'm not as sure about Thursday, because we have so much data coming out and you have to be prepared for this. The data that's coming out is going to start off as the initial jobless claims data. This is very important for this week in March because the market wants more jobless claims out there. We want more unemployment. The reason for that is because, yes, it's very horrible for anyone to actually wish this upon someone. I know that, and I don't really want that to happen to anyone. But there is a trade off in the market. There are trade offs all over the world. And this trade off is we need some pain for jobs, we need some pain in the economy to bring down inflation. Because if we don't cause the pain, then inflation is going to run rampant, and that's going to be even worse of a problem going forward. So the market wants this number to be high. We want more jobless claims, and we need this to be above the consensus of 196,000. Now, if this number is pretty good, the market could actually kind of pop off of this or at least hold up. But another big piece of data coming out is going to be the metrics for the quarter over quarter GDP report. So we're going to find out what the growth was, what we're seeing from the data, and this is going to be for the fourth quarter. Now, what's very important about the GDP growth is it gives us a good gauge of what the economy is doing. Is the economy going to actually influence inflation to go up? And are we actually getting closer to contraction, which is what the Fed wants for to essentially bring down inflation, right? So I don't really know how GDP is going to look. I think the odds favor it being very close to what the forecasts are because this is actually for Q4 and lots of the data already came out. We just need a final revision of it. Now, on top of all the data that's coming out later on, and by the way, this data is coming out 1 hour before the market opens. So make sure you're ready for this. This will affect how the market moves. We're most likely going to gap up or down again. However, I just want to note that a couple of hours into the market, very close to noon, if you are on the East Coast, I think a little later actually, we're going to be having the Fed bargain and the Fed Waller speaking. Well, now what they say about the Fed's policies, about the current economic situation could affect the markets as well. So we have so much data coming out that will affect how the market moves. You have to be ready for this. We could see quite a bit of volatility and also lots of nuanced price action. Now for Friday, another big piece of data is coming out that's going to be the PCE report. This is very, very important. This will affect the Fed's policies in essence and also how the market perceives inflation. Super, super important days ahead of us for Thursday and Friday. Now, for more details about the GDP real quick, it's once again the gross domestic product, fourth quarter and year 2022, the third estimates coming out. Once again, 1 hour before the market opens. This is what it's looking like on the real GDP basis. You can see there were many times where we had more nuanced data around like 2020, even into 2021. But as you can see, by 2022, it's starting to get tighter and tighter. So we're starting to see some contraction. And there's a high probability that this is going to get tighter and tighter as time goes on and eventually turn negative. The way that economists, they measure inflation is they look at two consecutive negative GDP quarters and they also look at unemployment. Now, we are getting closer to a dictionary definition recession, which tells me in the future there will be downside coming into the markets. But as of right now, we're not seeing too many signs of it because the technicals look bullish. The market's most likely going to hold up and keep on going for the time being. I'm just talking about maybe the next couple of months, maybe later on during the year, there will likely be some downside regardless of that. Now, what else is important is what on earth could GDP cause? If it's way too high, the market may not like that because really high GDP, much higher than what the forecasts are, could tell us that there are way too many increases in consumer spending and also private investments. That's important because this also could help increase inflation, and the market does not want that. If it's too low, this could also be negative for the markets because it could signal that we're getting closer to a recession. So once again, we want the GDP numbers to be very close to the consensuses and also the forecasts. We want them to be not too high, not too low. And that could actually be pretty okay for the markets overall. Now, when it comes to Tesla, we have some good news that's coming out. We actually are not in the best of place in terms of volume at 123 million, but Tesla did close actually above 190, which is an improvement from yesterday. The average volume was 145 million. We're still a little bit below it. However, it doesn't matter too much because I do believe we're going to see a big surge in buying pressure as we get very, very close to the big day ahead of us. The short volume did go up a little bit. I think this was actually from yesterday, as we did see more shorts pile in. And the problem for the shorts is if Tesla does start pushing up even harder, this could actually cause a short squeeze for Tesla, which becomes more likely going forward. Its price pairs ratio is pretty flat right now. We might see a big pump, one last pump by Friday, especially because of all the hype right now. However, I want to note that this is kind of like an oversold territory, like an RSI, not necessarily like an RSI, but it's similar to it. And what this tells me is if Tesla pushes up way too much, way too fast, we know what tends to happen later on. So please be very, very careful. Yes, Tesla could pump. Maybe Tesla gives us a very strong deliveries report. Maybe they absolutely crush and the share price just explodes, but it's most likely going to be a temporary thing. It's not going to last a super long period of time based off this previous chart and based off historical data. Now, Citigroup is pretty neutral on Tesla, but Wedbush has become a lot more bullish, and that's another good sign. I will talk about the reports in just a couple of minutes. Thursdays tend to be not the best of days for Tesla, one of the weakest days of the week. We're only green like 47% of the time. Fridays tend to be a little better. We're green like 48% of the time. And once again, the data is still telling us we tend to see better price action by the fourth hour of the day, followed by the second to last or the penultimate day of the trading session. And then for historical data, March tends to be a decent month for Tesla. We tend to be green only 46% of the time, but April tends to be actually a lot better. We tend to be green 58% of the time for the month of April, at least historically. So that is a good sign for Tesla for the time being. And finally, looking at the short interest overall, we saw a slight increase. I believe this was just 2 days ago at 23 million of the Tesla shares being shorted. Well, for a lot of these shorts who are piling into Tesla right now, I'd be very careful because you could trigger another short squeeze. So once again, I am still more bullish on Tesla. I just want to note that moves like this continue to happen, and it is what it is regardless. Now, for the news that came out, I have some very bullish news I'm going to talk about in just a couple of seconds, but I first want to talk about this. Tesla's actually giving us a very interesting view of their Model X. The Model X Plaid right here looks very luxurious. You can also note the fact that it has lots of legroom, very access to child seats, and also good storage for long cargo. So a very beautiful car. I actually enjoy riding in these, and I think the future of this company is still incredibly bright. When it comes to Elon Musk, I haven't really seen him tweets about Tesla for a while, so I don't really have anything from him. But when it comes to the news, we have some good news that came out. Firstly, Benzinga is saying that Tesla, NIO, Li Auto, and XPeng could jolt the sector with very, very good deliveries reports. In my opinion, that's very, very possible, and many analysts are actually agreeing on some very similar stuff. Wedbush just came out and they're very bullish on Tesla. They're saying that Tesla's set for a very strong Q1 delivery report, and they're actually talking about the fact that that's despite the price cuts we're potentially going to get for the Model 3, and that actually happened a while back. But in my opinion, they're still very bullish. They're saying that Tesla is anticipating about 420,000 deliveries that are most likely going to beat it in their opinions. And they're also talking about the fact that despite the fact that there was some mixed views of the Model 3 and the Model Y vehicles, they're still very, very bullish. They're still very excited. They did mention that there are some shaky macro conditions that could affect them, but they do believe Tesla's going to do very well. They also mentioned that they have a price target of about $225 right here. They think it's going to outperform the market, and they are very bullish for the near term. I know I forgot to mention this, but I think I should have the Tesla Model Y inventory levels around here. I want to note that so far, the inventory levels tell me that Tesla has been doing very well in China, very, very well in Europe, but I'm a little bit concerned about this very big end phase right here. We had a big spike right here in January because of the fact that demand was shifted during the time, and also Tesla had the price cuts. So we did see Tesla do very well in the US for most of the quarter, but right now the inventory levels are going up again. We're starting to see less Teslas being sold. Hopefully, it does not affect their USA numbers too badly. I just want to note that in the US, Tesla's doing well in the US overall, and I really believe that they're going to continue to flourish. I also believe that they're going to kill it in China and Europe, so the odds do favor them doing very well, but I still want to be very cautious and prepared for anything regardless of that. Now, despite all of this, despite the deliveries and all of this, in my opinion, the technicals look bullish on Tesla. I mentioned to you guys that on the hourly time frame, we had a bullish divergence that was developing. The bullish divergence is actually playing out quite nicely, and I believe we have a lot more room to go. I also want to note that on the hourly time frame, we have this possible inverse head and shoulders that's developing. So we actually saw Tesla bounce off the left shoulder support around this 186 level. It's about right here. This is where Tesla actually saw that bounce. We actually saw another bounce around here very recently. So what all of this essentially tells me is that Tesla is most likely going to continue to pop as time goes on. I also believe that Tesla is looking pretty good from this standpoint. Now, you could also draw out another inverse head and shoulders right here. So we might have two of them. I think it looks, actually, never mind. I think it was just that one. If it ends up playing out the way many investors are thinking, I do believe Tesla could actually do very, very well and continue pushing up from here. I also want to note that there's going to be a lot of hype as we get very close to the big date. So I do think we're going to get one more big push above 200 very soon. Now, could this happen tomorrow? It is a possibility, but I'm just not as certain about tomorrow because so much data is coming out. We have all this data. We have the Fed speakers. I just don't really know about tomorrow. Tesla does have this gap down here, so be prepared just in case the market does pull back. Once again, I'm not too sure, but it is also possible for us to rally on either like Thursday or Friday. Once again, I'm not as sure on Thursday, but by Friday close, I think Tesla is going to continue to push and touch this resistance zone. I also believe Tesla is going to try to break above it temporarily, maybe get above 200. And I think there's going to be lots of hype as we get very close to deliveries. Now, if you're bearish on Tesla, I just want to note that if you're bearish on Tesla, Tesla is most likely going to have to try to, retest this resistance, come down and continue to drop to this like 20 moving average around the very low 190s. And if it fails around the low 190s, it's most likely going to come down to retest this like 189 to 188 zone. We have a gap down here that I don't really think it filled the gap just yet. I think it's still open. So if you're bearish on Tesla, if you think Tesla's going to crash tomorrow, we could come down to fill this gap and then try to bounce. If you're bullish on Tesla, the more bullish case would be a break above 195 and then a rally to about 200. Now, in my opinion, technicals in the market look bullish. The technical standpoint is very bullish. And I can't really just solely say I'm bullish because, once again, the data could be very nuanced. I just don't know what's going to happen. There's so many unknowns. So I can't really promise anything, but I will say one thing: the technicals still look bullish, and the odds heavily favor us eventually getting a break to the upside for Tesla by Friday close. I don't know as much about Thursday, but I think by Friday it's going to happen. And you'll be wanting to see a break above 195 to confirm the uptrend. We're getting some bullish signals from the MACD. The odds favor us eventually getting above 200 by Friday close. I'm not too sure about Thursday. I mean, it could happen. I'm just not as sure. But I do believe by Friday we're going to get all the way up here. Now, what else is supporting Tesla is the SPY and the QQQ. One of the things I told you is that on the daily on SPY, we were very indecisive before. We're very indecisive, but I told you we'd likely see this thing bounce because we were getting some signs of some bullish price action. We had this doji right over here that formed. We also had the MACD continuing to give us some strength, and we saw this thing making more higher highs and higher lows. And this thing was struggling to actually break down. It had an easier time breaking up. So I told you guys we'd likely see this thing rally to the 50 moving average around 399. Instead, we just gapped above it, and we ended up closing around 401. So that's a very, very bullish signal. Now, I don't know if we're going to come down a little bit because of what just happened with the data or the data coming out tomorrow. I just don't know. But either way, despite that, regardless of what happens, the odds heavily favor more upside for SPY, for the overall market, right? The S&P 500. Because our MACD is wide open, we closed above the major resistance that was holding us back, which is the 50 moving average. And this happens to be what was holding SPY back for the last couple of days. I know this chart's kind of messy, guys. I'm going to fix it in just a second. But the bottom line is we broke a major resistance, and now this thing is getting very close to 402.5. If we break that, this thing could go all the way up to 404. Break that, then 406 becomes possible for the gap fill. Maybe by next week that could happen. The odds are still favoring more upside overall. But once again, be prepared for some choppy price action tomorrow. Maybe some downside. I just don't know. We have some Fed speakers and lots of data coming out. There's also this big gap down below. If it breaks the lows from today, if it breaks below 398 and comes to the 397s, the odds do favor us filling this gap and then trying to bounce. I once again don't know about Thursday. But regardless of all of that, overall the trend looks bullish. And later on, by Friday, going into next week, SPY looks like it's going to try to fly for 402 and try to get all the way up to 404 at the very least. And if that breaks, once again, 406 is possible. For the QQQ, I'm going to say the same thing. I'm not as sure about tomorrow. We are in a chop zone, so we do have a tendency of chopping around almost 315 to about 310. And the real question is, could we break above 315? In my opinion, regardless of what happens tomorrow, QQQ is most likely going to maybe chop or whatever happens. But going into Friday and beyond, we're most likely going to see this thing trying to push up even harder and retest 315. If it manages to break that, that could be very bullish. And maybe Tesla is going to actually help this thing pump if Tesla makes a big move, which I believe it most likely will. I also want to note that when it comes to tomorrow for the options chains, there's not really too much going on tomorrow. There aren't too many calls or puts expiring tomorrow, which is why I don't expect us to be insanely bullish. I don't think it's going to be that crazy. And I think the crazier day is probably going to be Friday because we have over 1.7 plus million puts expiring on Friday alone. 395 is max pain with a 2.34 put to call ratio. This changed because there were more calls that were bought for Friday, and that is helping the market to some degree. And on top of that, we're actually seeing some delta hedging that's going on right now. Some of these puts are being closed from yesterday, which is actually causing institutions to hedge, which is helping to bring the markets up as well. So we're seeing some hedging, delta hedging, more call buying, which are helping the market push up. Shorts are getting squeezed. There's more buying pressure. All of these things combined are helping the market pump. SPY is pumping on low volume once again, which means short covering is also playing a role. Overall, we might see a continuation of the short squeeze by Friday or even going into next week. Once again, favoring the bulls over the bears. NEO, in my opinion, is looking pretty nice. It's retesting this major resistance between this $9.8 to $10 area. In my opinion, it could slow down a little bit tomorrow depending on what goes on. But if it gets a break above $10, I don't know about tomorrow, but by Friday, maybe going into next week, it's going to depend heavily on the data. If they give us some good deliveries, this thing is going to fly, get very close to the higher 10s, maybe 11s. If we get a very good deliveries report, it's very possible. And overall, the technicals look more bullish on NEO for the time being. For the overall market for the QQQ and SPY, I just want to note that the VIX right now, it actually gapped down, but overall it broke below 20. So we have some good news. The good news for the bulls is this is looking quite bearish. We have a very bearish looking trend. Once again, I apologize about all these trend lines. But anyways, we might see the VIX bounce a little bit to try to fill this gap, which could bring the market down a little bit. So we could see a little bit of downside tomorrow, just maybe based off of this. And then the VIX will likely reject very close to 20 and then start coming down even lower. The trend looks more bearish. The RSI is dropping. I wouldn't be surprised if we see the VIX hit the 18s by either like tomorrow or even on Friday, which means it could get dragged down because of SPY and the overall market pushing up. Remember, SPY has a tendency of being correlated with the QQQ, and these things can help Tesla, which means later on, especially by Friday, we might see the VIX eventually push down. Whether we get a small push up tomorrow, it's eventually going to come down again below 19. If it comes down below 19 to this like 18 to 17.8 area, going to most likely be bullish for SPY, for the QQQ, and also for Tesla. Amazon closed just above 100. That's a good sign. In my opinion, I don't know if it's going to come down a little tomorrow. If it does, completely fine. But I do believe it's going to try to get a retest of 100. If it breaks it, we could go to about 102. This is assuming it drops a little bit tomorrow, by the way. Overall, the technicals look kind of strong so far. We do have a potential bullish triangle that could develop if we retest 102. If that happens, we could see Amazon continue to push up. For NVIDIA was up 2.17%. I told you guys that if it held 260, this thing would most likely get a bounce. And that is what most likely happened. That is, what ended up happening. So what I'm essentially seeing is there's this gap down here. I don't know if it's going to come down to fill this gap tomorrow because of the data and then try to bounce. But either way, it still is holding up. There's no confirmation of it tanking just yet. We could have been in a topping process, if anything, because we do have some major resistance around this 275. I wouldn't be surprised if it just cools off a little, then tries to bounce, or it just keeps going and tries to retest 275. If it breaks 270, it still has some juice left, and we may have some more time before the real meltdown starts. Finally, when it comes to Apple, I told you all that Apple most likely got the bounce off 157.5. That's a good sign because now Apple's testing this supply zone between 160 and 162, or the 162 zone, basically. I don't know if Apple is going to just trade sideways tomorrow, maybe cool off a little bit, cool off the RSI, and then try to bounce and keep going, or it just keeps going by Friday. Either way, it's going to most likely either pull back and bounce or just keep going. And I see this thing retesting 162. Now, if it breaks 162, which I think it really has the potential to do so, it could start testing the 163.6 zone, followed by potentially the mid 160s and maybe even 167.5 if it breaks that. So Apple does have some potential for upside. The overall technicals look a little bit more bullish, so it still is very possible. I'm not seeing any signs of a bearish divergence or anything like that. It looks more bullish overall. Google, nice bounce off 100, very, very beautiful. Pushed up. It's showing some signs of weakness. It's not as strong as the market because it was pumping off the news involving Warren Buffett before and also Chat GPT and NVIDIA. But besides all of that, I think Google has the potential to try to push up even more, try to retest 103. If it breaks that, we could get all the way up to 105. The technicals still favor the bulls just a little bit more, but the MACD is getting closer to curling on the daily. We need this 100 level to hold. If it fails at 100, that's not going to be a good sign. As long as it holds 100, it has the potential to get up to 105. For the dollar is basically pretty flat. It's not really doing too much right now. It's actually very close to where the bottom was right here. Pretty much just flat, not a whole lot is going on, and that's what's actually helping the market a bit. Now, I do anticipate the dollar is just going to remain pretty choppy, not doing too much, and that means the market might continue to hold up. Most likely, that's a good sign. Microsoft, in my opinion, it might actually cool off to start filling this gap just a little bit, but besides that, it's most likely going to continue pushing. The technicals are still favoring the bulls. There's no sign of it downtrending just yet. So in my opinion, it's most likely going to retest this 283 zone by like Friday, maybe into early next week, and it may even keep going from there and try to get to like 285. It's very possible. And finally, for what else is there? I think that's about it, except for my 10-year Treasury yield. For the 10-year, I just want to note something very important. I predicted yesterday that the 10-year would likely reject 36. Notice how we got rejected off 36 here and here and here, very close to where the 50 moving average is. So I predicted we'd hit 36 and reject, and we almost have this doji-like structure, which tells me that we might see this thing start to cool off a bit. If that's the case, if this thing does cool off and we come down to fill this gap, that could be bullish for the stock market. So overall, like I said before, I do apologize for not being able to predict tomorrow because it's very hard to tell what's going to happen with all the data and the Fed speakers. I don't know if Tesla's just going to try to rip up immediately or if it's going to take a little bit more time. But I believe, once again, mark my words, before the market closes on Friday, there's going to be a move and Tesla's going to get above 200. I believe that's most likely going to happen based off the structure and based off the technicals. Is it going to happen tomorrow? I just don't know about tomorrow, but I do believe before the close comes, it's going to make a big move. So overall, guys, just get ready for tomorrow. I want you all to be very prepared because it's going to be very unpredictable depending on what the data causes, depending on what GDP shows us, and also the jobs numbers. Just wait and see, be very, very calm, cool, and collected, and just know right now the technicals are favoring the bulls. So even if we do cool off, as long as Tesla holds these higher levels, as long as it holds around like 188, doesn't drop all the way down to 185, it's going to be completely fine. I don't really see it dropping too much. It might be a slight drop, but besides that, I once again see this thing getting a big move to the upside eventually later on. Either it could happen tomorrow. I just don't know about tomorrow, but by Friday close, 200 plus 202, mark my words. Thank you all for listening. Have an absolutely incredible rest of the day. Remain calm, cool, and collected. Tesla to the moon because the long term future is very bright. And peace out.